Hey friends, my name is Jake, this is the Fireside Tattoo Network, and this is 3 Minutes to Better Tattooing. So I had a client come in recently that wanted a piece that I thought would be interesting to share. So if you have paid attention to Fireside for any period of time, you've probably heard me talk about shape being the most important principle in great tattoo design. And if we're thinking about a hierarchy of principles, shape would come before value, before edges, before color. And most importantly, the shape that we have to deal with as tattooers is the one we have no control over, and that's the shape of the body that we're designing to. And so this client that came in with this idea, I thought was a great opportunity to illustrate this point. So let's hop over here, and I'm going to show you a couple of photos that I took of the client. Essentially, he wanted a blue jay that would sit on the top of his shoulder, front of his chest, upper chest, and his kind of traps here, the back of his shoulder. So essentially we're taking all of this shape, this shape, and then this shape back here. So in a way it presents a challenge because we're essentially presenting the tattoo. We have to consider it being viewed from about 4 different angles. I have this shape of his deltoid, where and how it meets against this existing tattoo, okay? I have his entire chest to deal with here, collarbone, all of this. I have the top of his shoulder up here, and I have the back of his shoulder. So I essentially have this 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 different angles that I'm kind of coming at this tattoo from, or that I have to consider, 4 different angles that I have to consider the vantage point of the viewer and how all of these things tie together to make a blue jay. So while this is kind of an extreme example, extreme version of this concept where we're having to consider someone looking at the tattoo from the front, from the back, from the side, and then also from above if they happen to be taller, if the person is sitting, we have all of these different angles that we have to consider. It happens all the time on a more subtle or more simple kind of basis, even with like one-shot tattoos where you're tattooing maybe a single item or a single element on a forearm. You still have to consider as it breaks the kind of viewer's line of sight where it might kind of move over to this part of the arm or that part of the arm. That's a subtle kind of example of the exact same thing. And when we're designing shapes, we want to kind of keep that in mind all the time. And so that's why I called this episode Right on Skin, Wrong on Paper. Because oftentimes, if you're drawing something logically, especially if you're a realism tattooer or something like that, and you're using a lot of photo reference, sometimes you'll become a slave to that reference. And then when it sits on the planes of the body and it starts to make turns in different ways, you're so hung up on the reference that you won't consider the possibility of rearranging shapes slightly so that they better fit the area of the body that you're designing to. So let's swing back over here, and I'll actually play for you guys a little video of my layout. While you'll see reference kind of pop in and out, I typically want to think about the basic shapes that make up the thing that I'm drawing, that I'm tattooing, in this case a bird, and just scrub them in the loosest possible way. You can see here that I have a blue jay sort of pulled up because I liked the angle of the head. I decided to sort of tuck the head into this kind of front of the deltoid. But at this point, I can't get too caught up in how the wings attach to the body, how the head attaches to the body. I have to just think about how those individual elements are gonna sit and relate to the part of the body that I am placing them on. So a lot of times it's just the loosest, simplest possible version of a shape. And I won't make you sit through all of it, but you can already tell that the way that I'm laying this out does not look anatomically correct. And so here's what becomes sort of my final line version. The wings don't necessarily look like they belong to the same bird. On the front of the chest, I wanted the wing to sweep underneath the collarbone. So I was thinking mostly about the collarbone when it came to the front of the chest. When it came to the back of the trap, when it came to the back of his shoulder, I wanted to have a more linear kind of like spray of the wing. And then as I got up onto the top of the shoulder, I was kind of cautious about getting too close to his neck. So the tail feathers are the most simple kind of all, and they just have this very short kind of arc to them. They don't really extend very far. So really on paper, nothing about this tattoo design is very believable. But let's switch over and just take a quick look at the end of the first session. And it's still not completely finished, but I thought it was far enough along to give you guys an idea of what I mean about designing the shapes to the body rather than worrying about how correct the bird is. And honestly, even though this is illustrative and my kind of style is illustrative overall, this concept works regardless of the style of tattooing. It could be more traditional or it could be full on sort of realism. I recently did a similar piece that I don't want to get into in this video because I'm trying to keep it short, but I did a similar piece where it was a little more realistic and it was a landscape, and the idea there was keeping the horizon line or the shoreline consistent enough so that it looked like the transitions were natural, even though the shoreline was making changes based on the terrain of the body that it was kind of moving across. So I guess the idea overall in this kind of short overview of a shape video, the idea overall is don't get too hung up on the reference and making something look correct. When you show it to clients, a lot of times you're at this kind of stencil mode or whatever, and so you've had to flatten the thing out and it looks awkward. Don't get too caught up in trying to correct that awkwardness. It's much, much more important to make sure that it sits properly on the body than it is to make sure that it looks proper in like a flat kind of orientation or layout. And finally, I'd say if you do place the stencil, particularly with more realistic stuff or where you're really held more strictly to a reference piece, don't be afraid to get that stencil on there, look at the area of the body that you're tattooing, look at it from different angles and see where the stencil or where the layout is just a little bit off. Most of the time you can tweak some little piece of a tattoo that whips onto another plane of the body. If it looks awkward, you can usually tweak it a little bit to make it fit the shape better, like design the shape a little better without impacting the overall look of the aesthetic of the tattoo, without taking away from the believability, all that kind of stuff. It's amazing. Like people, if you are drawing to the body, people will fill in the gaps for you. When they're looking at the design, they'll see it the way that it's intended to be seen. Whereas if you get too caught up in the stencil and you end up with areas of the tattoo that just look weird on the body, that stands out like a sore thumb. Even if it's correct, even if it's accurate to the photo that you're using as reference, it doesn't mean that it's accurate or correct on the skin. So that's it. Might have gone a little longer than 3 minutes, but that's okay. Thank you guys, as always, for supporting what we do, and I'll see you next time.